Boise once again found itself in the crosshairs of the Idaho legislature this past session. The lawmakers came for our renter protection laws and proposed a bill to completely restructure the Ada County Highway District. Today on CityCast Boise, reporter Jimmy Dawson with Boise State Public Radio is here to break down what this means for the city, and we'll see if we can find any actual wins this session. It's Tuesday, April 16th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Hey, Jimmy, thank you so much for being here to break down the 2024 legislative session with me.
Hey, good to be here, Lindsay.
I'm so glad we could have you on. I definitely felt the weight of every single one of those 94 days, and I imagine that you feel very similarly. Have you had a chance to recover yet?
No. I mean, we're talking, a couple days after Sine Die, and spoiler alert, could have a special session here pretty soon.
Ooh, I don't love those bad news bombs just yet. Today, I really want to focus on what the legislature did this session that was specifically targeting Boise and the Treasure Valley, because there was this one bill in particular that felt like it was crafted to specifically override Boise ordinances passed in 2023 that protected renters from discrimination based on their source of income. And this was aimed at helping people who use federal housing assistance programs like Section 8, right?
Yeah, that ordinance had been kind of in the works for a few years. And really what it wasn't even specifically on Section 8 housing vouchers. It was just any source of income a potential landlord or property manager assessing whether you'd be a good tenant couldn't hold your source of income against you. So like if you, for instance, just recently got divorced and you were expecting, a sizable settlement, some cash coming in. Maybe you have workers' comp coming in to help you out with your salary if you got injured on the job or something. As long as you could demonstrate some sort of income that you would be able to pay rent on time, then a landlord couldn't hold that against you. That doesn't mean that they had to rent to you. It just meant that, it can't be a negative against you. And so that passed last year. Boise City Council, all but one vote anyway, was in favor of it. And then, lawmakers up in north central Idaho in the Moscow area decided that wasn't a good idea and wrote that bill to kind of thwart it. But it didn't just take out that, it took out a couple other ordinances as well.
Yeah, I really want to get into exactly how this is going to affect, I mean, obviously people statewide because it's a state law, but particularly people in the Boise area. And like you said, lawmakers passed that bill, House Bill 545, and then Governor Brad Little signed it into law, preempting cities from regulating rental fees. So how will that specifically affect Boise and the ordinance that the city council passed?
Right. So this is that exact ordinance that we were just talking about. So now, landlords are free to say, you have Section 8, or, you don't have a steady job, even though you're showing me a bank account statement with tens of thousands of dollars in there potentially. And I don't really want that. You could spend that on a car or something and I wouldn't know. So that's really how it's going to affect Boise, or at least the main thrust of how it's going to affect Boise.
Okay. And when Governor Little signed this into law, he acknowledged that rapid growth has caused major issues for affordable housing. But then I thought it was really interesting. He said, we must have laws in place that protect property owners from local laws and ordinances that limit their ability to manage their property and determine their tenants. That said, I'm a strong believer in local control, where the locally elected leaders are best situated to develop solutions to fit their communities and neighborhoods. Jimmy, that kind of feels like he's talking out of both sides of his mouth a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what he has done with his transmittal letters for the past few years now. Signing something and then talking about, well, I don't really like this, but I'm going to do it anyway. And so, I don't know, you don't really get to have a good grasp on where he actually stands other than that he signed it into law. And so you logically have to assume that all of those other things he said weren't enough to change his mind. Not to mention, I mean, he can kind of propose laws, but he still has to get someone in the legislature to run it and get enough support to pass it. So I don't know. The veto is a very powerful tool that he has that he generally has not used, especially this year.
Yeah. Yeah. I was very surprised how little he used it, especially with some of the public statements he has made. But I really feel like that statement with that law specifically was giving, I support local control if you do the things that I think you should do or how I think you should do them, that I would argue is maybe a good indicator you don't actually support local government closest to the people.
And I think that that's really the argument that has been made for the last couple, 3, 4 years, especially in the state legislature, where, opponents to this bill were saying, look, go look at the Republican Party platform. You say that the government that governs best is closer to the people, right? And things like this tend to diminish belief in just how, dearly you hold that tenet to your political beliefs.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. It feels a little I feel whiplashed after I hear when they say both of those things. But like you said earlier, I want to come back to this. The income discrimination piece wasn't the only ordinance in Boise that this law is going to overturn, right?
It's not. So several years ago, Boise City Council passed this cap on application fees. We heard a lot of testimony both at the State House and during the city council meetings leading up to that passage, talking about how sometimes landlords would say, yeah, we got this $100 application fee and we don't actually have a unit available, or it's been promised to someone else, but we're going to keep taking applications, raking in this money that isn't going to go anywhere. Families were spending hundreds or thousands of dollars on application fees, according to people like Senator Ali Rabi, who's the executive director of Jesse Tree, the nonprofit that tries to keep folks housed in Boise. Exorbitant amounts of money being spent on those. And now that's going to go away when the law takes effect. We've also got another piece of the tenant protection ordinance that passed last year in Boise about security deposits. So if your landlord was going to demolish the building, and that's the reason why your lease is ending or breaking, they can't really take a lot of money from your security deposit if they're going to knock down the entire building, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
It's like, okay, who cares if your dog scratched up the carpet or, you put a hole in the wall or whatever? It's going to get demolished anyway. So that piece is also going to die with this bill passing.
Wow. I was going to say, I know that there was a lot of discussion about this as the pandemic was happening. So many people were moving in, but I know from my experience about a decade ago, that was an issue when we were looking for a property to rent, that we would put in these applications and you have to get an application in to even be considered. But so many places then would come back and say, oh, well, we don't have a unit available. And we were in a position where, that didn't mean that we were then going to be unhoused, but we spent quite a bit of money just trying to find some place that was open. And so I thought that was really, I liked that there were some renter protections put in place, because that was really hard on my family.
Yeah. And that's just shocking. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a business owner, but I just can't imagine feeling great about taking application fees for units that you don't have available and open.
This episode is brought to you by ShipStation. If you run an e-commerce business, you know how much work it takes to produce something great while dealing with complicated shipping issues. That's why over 130,000 companies have turned to ShipStation, an innovative tool that allows you to focus less on shipping and more on building your brand. With ShipStation, you can manage orders, label printing, reporting, and customer service on one easy-to-use dashboard. You'll reduce warehouse costs with reliable enterprise solutions and save thousands on shipping costs with discounts up to 89% off. Plus, you can effortlessly import orders from everywhere you sell online. So, turn your shipping challenges into opportunities for growth. Go to ShipStation.com and use code POD to sign up for your free 60-day trial. That's ShipStation.com, code POD.
So there have been some lawmakers like Senator Ali Rabi who have really fought for renters' rights and protections. And I'm really curious, do you know what was her reaction to this law?
I mean, she was the main person who stood up against it during the Senate debate anyway. And obviously, as the executive director of a pro-housing, anti-homelessness nonprofit who's actively working to keep people in their apartments and in their homes, she really did not like this. Talked about basically, look, the Boise cost of rent has just increased and skyrocketed over the past several years as more people keep moving in. We don't have enough housing. We've known this for a very long time, that Boise hasn't had enough housing to deal with all of this growth. And so one of the outcomes of that is that people have to pay through the nose to get into an apartment or get to a house, whatever it happens to be. And it's really difficult to try to regulate or whack down all of the bad actors in the real estate market.
Yeah.
Which, supporters of the bill even acknowledged, yeah, okay, maybe there are a few of these, but we don't want to limit people's private property rights. Senator Rabi came out very much against this. Mayor McLean even put out statements saying that people that she talked to really just want cities to pick up the slack when it comes to these laws that don't exist on a statewide basis.
Yeah.
So, that's just something that now they feel like they have one fewer tool in their toolbox to try to deal with these things that people are clamoring for.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the legislature really seems like it's put Mayor McLean in this no-win situation where the legislature has been unwilling to make laws citing it should be local control. But then when Boise City Council makes these laws, then the legislature suddenly wants to make laws saying, well, this really shouldn't be local control. So really, it's taking away tools without providing them anything.
And preemption laws really aren't anything new. I mean, we saw, I don't even remember how long ago it was, but the plastic bag ban, in the Wood River Valley, I think it was Ketchum specifically, maybe, they had one in place, and then the state came in and said, nope, no city can have a plastic bag ban. So it's not unprecedented, but it sure frustrates a whole lot of local, government folks and people in cities who want to, run the place that they live in their own way with limited state interference.
Well, and as representatives either on city council or the mayor who are closer to the people, and so hearing from citizens about this is something that this comes up in Boise a lot. And so for them to try to proactively be trying to create a better situation or more access to housing and then have the legislature just swoop in and tell them, no, you can't do that. That's got to be so incredibly frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Especially talking to Boise area representatives and senators, they kind of brace themselves every year for what I like to call screw Boise bills, even though they're not explicitly saying, Boise, you can't do this.
Yeah.
It's everyone with, let's say, a population of over 100,000 people or 200,000 people. If you want to really specifically target Boise, you have to do X, Y, and Z. And that's how they get around it, because otherwise it would be unconstitutional to single out a specific municipality.
Yeah. They just say, like cities who preemptively have the green belt, the majority of the green belt, this only applies to you.
Haven't seen that yet, but it wouldn't surprise me.
They get real creative. Jimmy, you really have a good pulse on the interplay between Boise and the legislature. What's your perspective on that relationship?
It's tenuous at best. I mean, look, it shouldn't be a secret that Boise is generally more liberal than the rest of the state, excluding places like Ketchum and maybe Moscow and, little pockets here and there. It's kind of the bright blue beacon, if you will. And it's not even that bright blue if we're really talking about it.
No, depends on the neighborhood.
Yeah. And especially when you go out to wider Ada County, they vote red consistently. Our county commission is made up entirely of Republicans. So, but as for the relationship, It's certainly like a love-hate thing. You definitely hear people talking about, oh, yeah, there's such good restaurants downtown and blah, blah, blah. But then you also hear, well, we don't want to create, 15-minute cities. That's a big buzzword for much more conservative Republicans, mainly insofar as funding things for pedestrian sidewalks or bike lanes and, things like that. Density is a big one, which they view as infringing upon people's private property rights, right? Why should a single family home in a neighborhood, which is all single family homes, have to live next to an apartment complex or a duplex or whatever it happens to be? So there are always those sorts of tensions, and it happens every single year.
Yeah. Yeah. Nope. It seems to be a theme that just keeps coming up. It really felt like this legislative session, they were very focused on making laws that, in their opinion, protect the right of property owners over the rights of renters. But were there any wins for renters besides just the legislature finally wrapping up?
Yeah, there was a win, I think, for renters specifically. You had Senator Ali Rabi partnering with some Republicans to sort of get rid of these eviction black marks on your record. So if you get an eviction notice and you are evicted from your house or apartment or whatever it happens to be, you can basically wipe that from your record after 3 years. You just have to have paid all of your back rent and then kind of wait it out. So this was a pretty bipartisan and seemingly a consensus bill. You had property managers who are like, yeah, we want to get paid, and this is a way to help incentivize people instead of them just giving up and saying, oh, well, I guess I'm getting an eviction thing on my record and it's never going to go away. And now I'm going to have to scramble to find some place to live that will accept me.
Yeah. Yeah. Not a lot of incentive there to then pay if permanently you're going to have that anytime you try to rent.
Right. So, that passed with a pretty big support. Governor Brad Little signed it late last month, and that seems to be at least, a smaller win for Boise renters.
Okay. Well, a win's a win. At least that's how it feels with this legislature. But the legislators didn't just take aim at Boise. They were also looking at passing a law that could have really impacted the entirety of Ada County. And this was the second session in a row that they proposed a bill that would try to mess with the Ada County Highway District. What were they trying to do, and did they see much success in this effort?
No, for the second year in a row, they pitched this bill out there and it didn't really seem to go anywhere. It landed with a dud. This would have essentially made every commissioner stand for re-election. It would have added a couple members to the ACHD board, and they would have had to run in partisan races, whereas right now, everything is sort of nonpartisan, even though you can go look up whether someone's a registered Republican or Democrat and who they donate money to, whether they're at these certain rallies or attending certain meetings, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
You can kind of get their political bent that way, but this would have put a D or an R next to their name. And, political science research shows that tends to then build that sort of tribal mindset of, well, I'm a conservative, so I'm going to vote for the R, right? And that's what people were worried about. But, it also would have sort of taken away some power from ACHD as well to craft its electoral boundaries. I think that would have gone to the Ada County Commission, which, like we said earlier, is all currently Republicans. And, that could have possibly hurt that as well.
So it failed this year.
Failed last year.
I'm going to say for me, thank goodness, failed last year. Do you think something like this is going to come back and they're going to try to target the Ada County Highway District again?
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, we call these zombie bills because they die and then they come back, they die and they come back. It's what we saw with the library bill. We saw it with school choice, school vouchers, education savings accounts, whatever you want to call it. That came back in the form of a tax credit this year, and it's going to come back next year. So it really wouldn't surprise me if this was a top priority. Again, for specifically, I think Representative Joel Palmer from Meridian, that's kind of his bag. He's the one who's been behind it the last couple of years.
Okay. He's all up in his feelings about that?
Seemingly, yeah.
Okay. So we're all going to decompress, do something creative and constructive, and then buckle up and plan on that coming back next year.
I guess so. Yeah. You've got a while.
Yeah, we got time. We got all summer, everybody. So what's the takeaway for the people of Boise from this session, in your opinion?
You know, a not insignificant amount of people in Boise rent. The Boise Ada County Homeless Coalition 2023 said roughly 28% of people in Boise rent. So, you're quickly approaching a third, more than a quarter of the entire city rents. It's a tough landscape, right? Unless you've got kinder landlord, maybe one of those people who owns a property or just a handful of properties, does it themselves, kind of does it on the private market side instead of giving it to one of the bigger property management companies. It could be a whole lot tougher to get into a place or stay in a place. If you do at least get evicted, then there's a bright spot there. But on the front end, when you're trying to stay in your place or actually even get into a place, it could potentially be a lot harder. That's the biggest takeaway that I can think of.
Wow. Yeah, no, it's gonna get a lot harder out there.
Cue happy music.
Well, thank you so much, Jimmy. This was really informative and hopefully is information that people can use. And I hope you get a chance to decompress from the legislative session.
I'll do my best. Thanks, Lindsay.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell your friends about us? We'll be back tomorrow morning with a breakdown of the most controversial laws from this legislative session. You won't want to miss it.